Welcome to God Talk. I'm Pastor Dan. If this is new to you, Dan Smith. Newly retired pastor, and I'm now what they call a global evangelist for Quiet Hour Ministries. And I get to go around the world and preach for God. I'm not tied to a local church, and I love pastoring. I love my church and miss those people. But I have a new role and enjoying that too. Got back from India a little while ago, and I've got about 2 months here at home. I've got some things to do around here, but I won't travel overseas again until the middle of April, and then go for 10 weeks, 5 weeks, to speak in 3 different places in the Philippines. I'm trying to cluster what I do, so I'm not on that plane flying overseas all the time. I can handle it, but it's tiring, 15 hours on the plane. So I just fly once, and I get over the jet lag, and then I'm there. And go a week and a half here, take a couple days, and then a week and a half, couple days, and a week and a half. My wife's going maybe half the time with me, and so I'm happy over there. And then I come back, I preach in a couple of churches here periodically, and this is what I do. In the meantime, I get to come here and have a program on God Talk with LOBN. I've been proud to be part of LOBN for a long time. Had a program for a long time called Flame of Truth, which they still show, which I'm thrilled for. Over 100 programs we made. We sat right here in our studio and did Revelation GPS. I hope if you haven't found that, you're watching that periodically with John Pauline, my good friends. Shifra, Viana, these guys, Philip, I'm sure they're doing great with that. But they gave me my own program here on God Talk. And if you I want to hear a 28-minute message on the character of God once a week, this is our slot. I was doing Revelation before I went on the last trip, and I'm going to get back to that next week. We will talk about the 7 seals. But in the seals, there's always the subject of the Sabbath. I thought, I could do it after, but let me do it before. So when we talk about seal, it will fit in if this is a little bit new to you. We are Sabbath keepers, and obviously I go around the world, I preach about the Sabbath. And I have different ways of preaching about it, and usually I have 100 slides, PowerPoint that are going up with me while I'm preaching. Often I'm translated, so there's someone next to me, and we've got to cut it down in order to get the rhythm of that right. And there's probably, 1,000 people, sometimes more, in a basketball stadium or at a college somewhere. That's what I do. So, but I thought, let me just say it here. Sometimes these not classic sermons, but classic subjects don't get preached. And these are the core. So let me just put a few ideas together of some other ways of looking at and presenting the Sabbath. And if it's new to you, I pray that you'll think about it hard. If it's something you're familiar with, maybe there'll be some other slants. And I'll even tell you some of where I get them here and there. And every sermon is got streams from various places. I had to preach for a young adult series at the La Sierra Church years ago. And I was 50 years old, maybe, give or take. And they asked me to do a series not for everybody, but for the college students, young adults. I was scared to death. I am not that person really by nature and talent and giftedness. You take Sam Lenore and Tim Gillespie and these young, they were young then, they're getting less young now, but they're still pretty terrific guys, and they know how to speak right to college kids. And I was a little freaked out. But anyway, they said, no, Pastor Dan, we want you to do it. They went and got me some younger clothes, and I did the best I could. Anyway, I had to preach the Sabbath in that series. And somehow this theme came to me. That God wants to take our relationship to the next level. And so I thought about talking about relationships in my life. Girls I dated as I was learning relationships. high school. The big debate whether to hold hands or not with a young girl in Singapore, Far Eastern Academy. This is 50 years ago now. I'm 66. And so a very wonderful girl, and we had this discussion because the rules of the school were no holding hands, no physical display. And then finally one night we did hold hands, and your relationship goes up to another level. First kiss, airport in Bangkok. It seems silly now, but these were important moments when you're growing up. And then, of course, later marrying Hilda, we were 30s in this go-around. And I didn't hold hands for a long time because I was afraid. I'm a pastor, and how does this all work when you're dating as a pastor? And anyway, I was just careful. So finally, I was afraid that she would wonder about me if I didn't touch her somewhere along the line here. So I was enjoying her and thinking this might go somewhere. Finally, we're at a concert with Dorothy Hamill, the ice skater from the Olympics. She was skating, and there was music and songs. And finally, we had to walk up all these stairs, and I took her hand and helped her up the stairs, and then just didn't let go when we got to the top. Both of us remember that night. Relationship goes to the next level. And while you're talking and pretending you're not even thinking about it, we both know there's this next level. Then there's a kiss, then there's a wedding, then there's a honeymoon, and there's these levels of relationship. Now we're retired together without children all the time with us, without work all the time. And God's the same. And he wants to have another relationship, and he came down and he created man on Friday, and he made marriage, and he gave us his gift of making love and sexuality, and he gave one more gift, the gift of the Sabbath. Two gifts on the same Friday afternoon, and somehow the whole world wants more of one and not the other. And I said that to those 1,000 kids at the school. I said, why does everyone, obviously, everywhere there is people, there's been sex somewhere along the way. So the whole world loves that. All the movies are about it, love everywhere in every movie. What happened to the Sabbath? God made sexuality and marriage so that two people could have delight and bond themselves together. And God gave the Sabbath so that we could have delight and bond with God. He said, delight to know thy Lord. Delight in the Lord, Isaiah 58:14. What happened? People ask me, is the Sabbath still binding on Christians? No one asked me that about sex and making love. If you think about every day of creation, every day should be better than the day before. More complex, more meaningful, more fulfillment. Land, animals, fish and birds, animals, man, women, and Sabbath. Sabbath was meant to be a day of absolute delight. Every pleasure we have was meant to be a pleasure to lead to what Sabbath was to be with God, with music and food. I took Hilda to see Frozen last week as our Christmas gift to her. Downtown L.A., 2,000 young girls and Hilda and me and their parents. And it was just mesmerizing. With all the color and the music and the sets, and it's just a powerful pleasure. We just traveled around the world, and we had music and culture and stories and people and nature and just so much stimulation in our life. And God meant the Sabbath to be the fulfillment of all those things. Just delight. And we've lost it. God is a lover. Every movie has moments where there's this love, Titanic or whatever. And that's what God has. And God longs to be with us. And our picture of the Sabbath is that He came down to be with Adam and Eve every Sabbath. Where are you? Where are you? Hiding. And every Sabbath, Friday night, when the sun goes down, God fills that time with His presence. He wants to be with us. He created us in His image. We are 1% different from the animals. You think about that 1%. the DNA that makes us in the image of God. Why would he do that? So he could be with us and take us to the next level. And if you don't have a Sabbath with him, if you say it's not necessary, we don't need that, we miss that level that God wants. We're not just having a few minutes a day where we have a little devotional experience, but a Sabbath. 24 hours. Not we go to church for half an hour and go to mass and then go back to our world and go golfing and go do your chores and do study for your school. A Sabbath. 24 hours to be with God. That was God's plan for the next level of relationship with God. He made it a commandment, yes. But he made it a commandment only because he had to. Heartbreaking to God. I have to make a commandment out of this. You better spend a day with me. Remember the Sabbath day. Why should you have to do that? I've had to be pretty directive sometimes with couples who come with messed up marriages. And after we talk nicely, finally I have to say, my brother, write it down. Here's what we committed to. Here's what you promised to do. I will not do that anymore. Why should I have to write down these commandments? To a young couple that stood in front of a church, thrilled in a tuxedo and a white dress, and said, I'll love and cherish you forever. I'll be faithful to you forever. Now I have to give you commandments? Too bad. Angels had no idea of 10 commandments. It was natural to them. Worship every Sabbath. No one's going to command us to go worship God when we get to heaven. Whole world come together for worshiping God. No one's going to skip. No one's going to say, I'll go next week. No one's going to be too tired. No one's going to say, I'll get back to you next week, God. But I got some other things. I want to watch a game. We're going to worship God. Sabbath. So God made it a commandment. Wants us to know how life is at its very best. Gives us the Sabbath. You want life to be at the richest? 6 days work and then take a day to restore your soul. Now all the literature says it. Harvard Literature Review has an article. Predictable time off required, mandatory. Now you get in trouble and you can be fined if you don't give people coffee breaks. If you don't give them lunchtime the whole time. If you cheat on any of that, you can be legally fined. Now it's clear that rather than working 70 days a week, if you'll work 6 days and take a day off to restore your soul, you'll be better off. And you'll be more productive and get more done. I had an uncle who was a professor here at Loma Linda years ago. He's passed away now. In the public health department. One of the founders. They had one professor who was off getting his doctorate, sponsored by the university. He could not get it done. He got down to the conclusions and just couldn't conclude. And they would have to give him another extension. Every time he extended, that meant another year of you having to cover his classes. Finally, this uncle of mine said to the dean, let me handle it. Called the guy up. How you doing? Struggling. 4 years, 5 years already. Need him to go back to work. He said, if you could do anything you could do for a month, what would you do? I would go with my son up to the Minnesota, to the call of Boundary Waters up there. Land of 10,000 lakes. And you have your canoe and you carry it over the mountain and you canoe. Portage. I've done it. In Canada, not there. I said, hey, go do that. We'll pay for it. Don't think about your project. Don't do anything. You just go for a month. You and your son have the time of your lives. Okay. So they go. They paid for the food, paid for the canoe, paid for everything. Came back. How did that go? We had the best time. He said, go for another month. Go do it again. Came back after 2 months. Wrote the conclusion in an afternoon. True story. Told me himself. What was completely blocked and clogged up in his brain opened up after 2 months. And we sometimes think that if I got to stay up late, I got to get this project done, I got to come up with something, I got to get a marketing campaign, I got to get a sermon, I got to write a song, I got to teach a class, I've got to be creative. And we're pushing up against something and our brains get clogged, our souls are clogged. And God knew what he was doing when he says, take a day off. Get your brain unclogged. Get back to who you are. I'll never forget Friday night. Sam Lenore was a wonderful chaplain at La Sierra for over 20 years. And he began to bring bricks up from the front. And he would bring a brick, place it. He said back in the Israelites in Egypt, there were slaves. If you ask them, what do you do? Well, I'm a brick maker. He would bring another brick. You ask the father, well, what do you do? Well, I'm a brick maker too. Ask the grandfather. Everybody, for thousands of people, are all brick makers building huge buildings for Egypt. Egypt got mad and they said, you have to make the straw, find the straw and make the bricks. Brick makers, machines, slaves. And God finally says, you go into Pharaoh and says, I want you to come apart. Stop it. That is not who I made you to be. They've come out to a mountain and he says, remember the Sabbath. 6 days work, but the seventh day, no more work. Not you, not your family, not your kids, not your servants, nobody. Stop. I did not make you to be a machine, just producing all the time. I made you with a soul. I made you in the image of God so you could be with me. And if you have lost your soul somewhere, come back. I have a whole sermon I preach now. Don't lose your soul. I've preached it here. Don't lose your soul. And we can let the drive for money, the drive to get ahead, the drive to get stuff done, the drive, do your house chores, whatever it is, and you lose your soul along the way. I take young people who want me to write a letter for them to come into Loma Linda, be in medical school. I take them out to lunch. I took one of them out last week. Smart girl, baptized her when she was 10 years old. Smart in college and nailing it. And I said, go be a great doctor. Don't lose your soul. Keep your heart of compassion. You write that essay to get into medical school. You live by that. I said, don't cheat the Sabbath. Don't study on the Sabbath. Close your books. Put them away. Restore your soul. You graduate from Loma Linda and you walk down that aisle and up the stage and you become a doctor and you become a healer. You keep your values and your passion for healing and you keep your soul for God. Don't lose your soul. God says, let me give you a Sabbath. Keep your soul. Sabbath is a day when you get back with your soul. They talk about the story of the Nepalese Sherpas carrying all the load, going up the mountain, and one day they stopped and said, what are you doing? He said, we're waiting for our souls to catch up with us. A lot of us need to let our soul get caught up. Get back with your soul. I retired, I've been getting my soul back too. I kept it, but certainly was in the battle, racing around, trying to be all things to everybody. And I'm trying to be more focused on my soul. Bible, prayer time, reading, soul time. Sabbath. Sabbath is the day to be with Jesus. If you're a Christian, someone asked me one day, isn't Sabbath kind of an Old Testament thing, Pastor Dan? Well, I agree with the Old Testament too. But we're New Testament Christians. I said, I keep the Sabbath because I'm a Christian. The Bible says the people to the end of the world, Revelation 14:4, will follow the Lamb wherever he goes, 144,000. God's last witness to the world. People follow the Lamb wherever he goes. Where did the Lamb go? He said every week he went to the Sabbath, as his custom was. I'm a Christian. I follow Jesus. It's not only a day where we do with Jesus, it's a day to be with him. He is the Son of Man, is Lord of the Sabbath. And God made the Sabbath for us to put everything else away. Not just to have a day off, not just to have a vacation, but to be with Jesus. I have a little parable I use. If you've heard it, I'm sorry. A wonderful college, a high school girl on her way to college. Last few weeks they had what they call the prom. And she didn't wait for some guy to ask her. She asked him and said, would you take me to the prom? You want me? She was the most beautiful, the smartest, the cheerleader, the athlete, the Christian. She was gorgeous. He's an average guy, but she wanted him. He said, but I live outside of town 50 miles. I ride a school bus to school. There's no bus that's going to bring me to the banquet. How am I going to come? She says, my father owns the Mercedes dealership. He'll give you a Mercedes. Gives him a Mercedes. Oh, he loves that car. He's racing around, hot rodding with his friends. Until the last minute, all of a sudden, that day of the prom, he wakes up. Oh, no, today's the prom. The guy gave me the car so I could be with his daughter. Races home, grabs a shower, races down to her house, knocks on the door. The father comes to the door. Dude, I'm sorry. She waited for you, but you're late. She went already. He goes over to the big gym where they're having the wedding. He looks in the window, and here is this beautiful girl, dressed up, hair is gorgeous, and she's dancing with his best friend. The whole point of the car was to be with the girl. The car is fun by itself. Sabbath is fun by itself. If you just have a day off, okay, good. Go golfing, go shopping, whatever you want to do. But the purpose of the Sabbath was to be with God. And God fills that day with His presence. And He wants to give you delight in the Lord, Isaiah 58:14. Call the Sabbath a delight with God. It's a day to be with Jesus. Whatever gives you Jesus, whatever gives you life, has to be both. Some things can give you life, but not Jesus. You can have Jesus, but not life, I suppose, maybe. That's spiritual, but boring. Supposed to be both. Sabbath's supposed to be a taste of the last days in heaven. Sabbath is a sign, a memorial of creation. Well, heaven is going to be creation recreated. And so heaven is not only a memorial of creation, it is a taste, a macrocosm. Like those pink spoons of Baskin-Robbins or ice cream, we did it in Amman, Jordan the other day. We had a few hours to wait. No, in Turkey. We're in Istanbul, Turkey airport. And here's ice cream. Oh, a lot of little pink spoons trying to choose all those flavors. And God says, let me give you a Sabbath as a taste of heaven. Heaven, time's going to slow down. We got 1,000 years. And so Sabbath, we slow down. Not racing around. Put it away. Put the media away. Stop. Put the school books away. Put work away. Put the chores away. We don't do the car. We don't clean the house. Put it all away. It's not a day to get caught up. It's a day to be with your soul. Not made to just live machine life. Be productive. It's a day to worship. In heaven, we're all going to worship. No one's going to skip worship. No one's going to blow it off. So Sabbath, we worship. I'm going to be with my dad again. Imagine a dinner when we're all together. I'm going to go down here in a few minutes and go see my mother, 90 years old, 18 years alone. We're going to see him again. And so Sabbath is a day when we eat with our favorite people. I was with a group of people Sabbath. Just 40 people. Every one, I love them. We've done 25, 30 years together. Not going to shop. Not going to shop in heaven. No one's going to go buy anything and bargain, take money out that they earned to do it. So we don't shop on Sabbath. God's going to provide everything. We're not going to work in heaven. Not going to be a pastor. Not going to be a doctor or a nurse. No sick, no jail, no counselors, no nothing. No farmers. So we stop working on the Sabbath. People ask me, how do you know what you can do on the Sabbath? If you can do it in heaven, you can do it on the Sabbath. Sabbath is a taste of what heaven will be. Have you lost that? Supposed to be the best. Doesn't matter which day, my friends. You'll have to decide. I listened to a sermon yesterday. Riding across the country over to Arizona, listening radio stations. Here's this guy talking about the Sabbath. Doesn't matter which day. You can keep Sabbath in honor of creation, or you can keep Sunday in honor of resurrection. Bible doesn't say that. Bible said, I made this day to be a sign to you, a seal. And you are mine, I am your God, and you are my people. Who are we to say to God, I don't want your sign, I'm going to make my own sign, God. Resurrection is good. I want to honor the resurrection. Yes, I do. That's baptism. But I am not going to be the one to face God someday and said, I wasn't so comfortable with your sign, God. I had made my own. Bible says the Sabbath is a sign to be with God. God says he makes it holy. You can't change holy. I use a baseball. The guy down here in San Diego, the Dodgers were playing San Diego. Young kid came up from the minors and he hit his only hit in his life was a home run to the outfield. The guy caught the ball. The usher went to ask him for the ball. The guy wouldn't give it, thought he would sell it somewhere. Ridiculous. So they had to go to the box of baseballs and say, here, we couldn't get the one. Here's another one. Looks exactly alike. There's no machine in the world that can tell the difference from the one that got the home run and the one out of the box. It's okay? No, it's not. The guy wants the one that went out. Give me one from the box. You cannot transfer the home runness from the home run to the ball from the box. When God makes something holy, be careful, my friend. And if you're a Sabbath keeper, I hope you'll catch the heart and soul of it. It's a day of delight to be better than all the other, better than making love, better than marriage, better than all of it, to be with our God. Sabbath pretty tied to your picture of God. If God isn't a God you like to be with, you don't delight in, then why would you want to keep the Sabbath? Sabbath is supposed to be a day of delight to be with the God of delight. Read Song of Solomon again. God of delight. God of love, who made us in his image so he could spend a day with us every week. And he comes down and sit alone. If we don't come to the Sabbath, then we stand him up. We leave him sitting there, goes back after the day. They didn't show up again this week. Or we can meet him every Sabbath. I encourage you to enjoy the blessing of the Sabbath and be with our God, a God of delight, the God of the very best. Someday, we'll get to do it face to face. And these Sabbaths, who we don't get to see them face to face, are a taste of that day. May you enjoy the blessing of the Sabbath. God bless.